class is a chair mobility practice. We're going to be staying in our chair and doing movements that mobilize and warm up from our ankles to our head. These are movements you can do anytime you're seated in a chair. It's great to do in the morning before you get moving, or really anytime. Start comfortably seated. If you need to scoot forward a little bit so that your feet can touch the ground, scoot forward, and we'll check in with our posture. So just like when we're seated on the ground, we want to make sure the pelvis isn't tipping forward or back. So we've got our upright pelvic bowl, our neutral pelvis, our shoulders stacking over the pelvis. Hands can rest somewhere on your body. You can have them on your chest or your heart. And we'll start with the eyes closed, taking a few deep breaths of any kind. Noticing where you feel the breath move in the body. Go ahead and open your eyes. Let your arms rest. We're going to start by moving our feet. So we're going to have the feet down and just alternate lifting one heel at a time. So the toes or the ball of the feet will stay down and we're just lifting the heels up. So we're starting to move the ankles, and by lifting the heels, we're also starting to move the calves. Now, as you do this, keep that same nice upright posture. So we don't want to start collapsing while we move the ankles. Keep sitting up tall. Try a few more times, lifting one heel at a time. Lower both heels down. Now check that posture again. Have some engagement in the core so that we can sit up tall. Now we'll try to keep the heels down, sitting up tall. Try to lift up the toes. So we just lifted the heels. Now we're keeping the heels down and lifting the toes up. So the ankles are working the other way. Now we're working on that dorsiflexion, pulling the toes up toward the heels. And really just try to hold everything else still. Focusing on the ankles, lifting the toes, keeping that nice upright posture. Might feel a little tricky to lift the toes. If they barely lift, that's okay. That's why we're working on this ankle mobility. So keeping our ankles mobile is really important for keeping the knees and the hips healthy. Good, last one, lower down. Now check how you're sitting. Really start to think about your core. Hands can come to the sides of the chair or somewhere down so you can just help yourself here. We're gonna work on our hip flexion, which means we're gonna try to lift up one foot off the ground and then step it down. Lift up the other foot and step it down. So this looks really simple, but we're working our hip flexion, the ability to move the hip without anything else moving. So while you do this, make sure the hips aren't moving side to side. Make sure the back isn't rounding. So we really want to work on nothing else moving as we flex the hips. And using your glutes will help you. So we want to squeeze the glutes here as we alternate lifting up one foot at a time. Really trying not to change anything else about our posture. This is also getting into the core. So there's a lot you can do sitting in a chair as far as moving your body. Good, lower it down. We're gonna pick up the right foot again. So we'll flex that right hip and hold it here. So again, check your posture, check that the shoulders are over the pelvis, and we'll externally rotate this right hip. So we're gonna almost flip this right heel up, which means our right hip is rotating out a little bit and then come back to neutral. So we're going to keep it lifted and do that a few more times. Externally rotate the hip, bring it back to neutral. Keep that right glute on. Externally rotate, sit up tall, back to neutral. Externally rotate, back to neutral. One more, externally rotate, back to neutral, step it down. Switching sides, recheck that posture. Make sure the pelvis isn't tipping forward. Pick up your left foot, so that left hip is flexed. Keep that left glute really strong. Sit up tall, and now we'll externally rotate that left hip. So it's kind of like our ankle is swiveling up, and then back to neutral. Externally rotate that left hip, any amount. back to neutral. Keep that same posture. Externally rotate. So we're working the outer left hip. Let's do a few more. Externally rotate, sit up tall, back to neutral. Externally rotate, back to neutral. One more. Externally rotate the hip, back to neutral, step it down. Good, let's bring the hands to the thighs. Take a few rounds of seated cat-cow. So we'll let the chest come forward, maybe start to draw the shoulder blades in. And then exhale, round your back. Chin can come toward the chest. Good, stretching out the back. Come back to that nice seated posture. Shoulders over the pelvis. We'll flex that right hip again. So we'll lift up the right foot. Again, hands can come to your chair or somewhere for support. And now we're going to abduct this right hip. So we still want to keep that right glute really strong. And this time, the leg's going to move out to the side a little bit without anything in the rest of our body moving, and then back to center. So your right hip will move out to the side a little bit, back to center. This is called abduction, when it moves away from midline or away from the body, and then back toward center. So the right hip is abducting out to the side, back to center. Let's do a few more abducts. So we're working that right glute, right hip, sitting up tall so the core is working. One more. Good, step that right foot down, recheck your posture, adjust as needed, pick up the left foot. So we're flexing that left hip. Make sure that by lifting up that left foot, we haven't rounded the spine. So keep that nice tall posture, abduct so that left hip moves out to the side a little bit, back to center. Left hip moves out to the side without anything else moving, back to center. Think about that outer left hip and that left glute. Back to center, a few more times. Hold still everywhere else. So it's a good amount of core work to keep yourself in this upright position. Release it down. Let's take a side bend here to get a lateral stretch or a side of the body stretch. We're going to reach the right arm up and really start to side bend over toward the left. Let the left ear release, whatever that looks like, so the neck is relaxed. And really focus on this stretch in the right side of the ribs, right side of the torso. Come back up. Release it down. Switch sides. Left arm up. Side bend over to the right. Let the neck release, whatever that looks like for you. And really feel this stretch into the left side of the ribs, left side of the body. Big breaths in and out. Come back up, release it down. We're going to bring the fingertips to the head of the humerus, or right at the top of the shoulders. And again, sit up nice and tall. Make sure we're not tipping the pelvis or popping the ribs. We're going to hold this nice upright feeling. So really imagine that there's a string at the top of your head and someone's lifting it up. So we've got that really tall seated position. We're going to rotate just our thoracic spine side to side, which means only where your rib cage is. That's where you're going to rotate. So we don't want anything in the lower body moving. So hold still in the pelvis, the hips, the legs, and we're just rotating right from our thoracic spine, right where our ribs are. Side to side, really small movement. So we're trying to move in as many ways and directions as we can in our chair, so that we can still get that full body movement. So we're working our way up from the feet to the head. Come back to center, release the hands down. We're going to roll the shoulders one at a time. So start with that right shoulder, roll it up and back, and then the left shoulder up and back. And just keep doing this. Make sure you do one at a time so you can really start to notice any differences between your right and left sides, whether that's in the shoulder blade, or any of that fascia or tissue. So one side might sound a little bit different or feel a little bit different, And as we roll the shoulders, we always want to roll backwards. Since most of us have some type of rounded shoulders in our posture, we get really chronically tightened in the front of the shoulder. So we always want to roll backwards so that each time we roll backwards, we can stretch and open that tissue in the front of the shoulder and chest. Few more shoulder rolls, make them as big as you can. Good, bring your palms forward so our wrists are coming into extension. Again, sit up tall, make sure nothing's rounding or arching. And we'll protract our shoulder blades, which means we want to press our palms forward. And what that does is it moves our shoulder blades away from the spine. And then we'll do the opposite. We'll try to squeeze our shoulder blades in toward each other or in toward the spine. That's called retraction. So we press the palms forward as much as possible, protracting the shoulder blades, and then squeezing those shoulder blades in to retract the shoulder blades. Do that a few more times, and really try to just isolate this movement in our scapula, which are our shoulder blades. So try not to let the whole spine move or the pelvis move. We're just feeling the movement from the upper back. Release it down. Good. Take a few more shoulder rolls just to stretch it out a little bit. We'll bring the arms up overhead any amount. So whenever we reach the arms up, we don't need to force them all the way up straight. That's a lot of shoulder flexion. And for a lot of people to get the arms up, they'll pop the ribs in order to get the arms all the way up overhead. And we don't want that to happen. We want to keep this nice posture we're in. So if arms up overhead means diagonal, stay wherever they need to be where you can feel like your front ribs are knitting in and your pelvic bowl is staying upright and not tipping. So just go to whatever height that is, and we're going to lift the shoulder blades up and down. So hold your nice upright seated posture. Lift your shoulder blades or your scapula up towards your ears and back down. So before we protracted and retracted our shoulder blades, that's two ways our shoulder blades move, but they also move up into elevation, which is when they come up toward the ears, and down into depression when you really pull the shoulder blades down. So just try that a few more times. Release it down. We're going to let the head gently turn a little bit to the right. So just to whatever degree it feels good. Back to center. A little bit to the left. Back to center. One more each side to the right. Keep your posture to the left. Back to center. Now we'll let the right ear come to the shoulder. Grab on with that right hand toward the left ear. You can gently pull as much as you want, really focusing on the stretch in the left side of the neck. Take a few deep breaths here. Make sure this left shoulder stays down and doesn't start to rise up toward the ear. Come back up, release it down, and we'll switch left ear to the left shoulder. Make sure that right shoulder doesn't lift. Grab on with the left hand. You can pull a little bit more. Really focus on the stretch in the right side of your neck. Come back up, release it down. We're going to move to our wrists and our hands. So we'll come back to the same position with the palms forward. So when our palms are forward, the wrists are in extension. If we were to go the other way, pulling the fingers back toward the forearms, that's our wrists flexing. So we want our wrists in extension. Really spread your fingers. Look at the hands. We're going to slowly lower one finger at a time into a fist, starting with the pinkies. So as you look at your hands, you'll notice probably your dominant hand works a little bit quicker. Thumbs will cross over when you get to a fist. Knuckles pull down and back towards your forearms. Pull back as far as you can. It's a big, big stretch. Big breath in. Out through your mouth. Circle both directions with your fists. Let's do that again. Bring the wrist into extension. Really spread your fingers. Look at the hands. Start with the pinkies. Try to really slowly lower one finger at a time. Once you get to the thumbs, cross them over. Knuckles will pull back in toward the forearms. Big breath in. Out through your mouth. Circle both directions with your fists. Good, release it down. Now we're gonna bring the right palm forward with the fingers down, and we'll bring this right elbow in toward the ribs. Take your left hand and pull back across the right fingertips, really stretching that right wrist, maybe feeling a lot into that right forearm. And again, exhale through your mouth. Switching sides, left palm forward, elbow comes in, pull back with the right fingers. Big breath in, out through your mouth. Shake it out a little bit. Good, now we're gonna do some torso circles. So similar to that cat-cow where we flex and extend the spine, we'll do that with a little bit of a circular movement. So we're gonna make some circles starting to the right. Try to do a few circles in both directions. Good, coming back to any comfortable seat when you're ready. Sitting up in that nice posture, eyes will close. We'll start with the hands right on the ribs, so on the sides of the ribs, closing your eyes. And we'll take some 360 breaths here. So hands on the ribs is great to really focus on that expansive breath. As you inhale, really work on feeling the ribs expand side to side. Breathing into your hands. And feeling the ribs expand front to back. You can keep the hands at the ribs or bring a hand to your heart, hand to your belly. And we'll take a few more of those 360 breaths here with the eyes closed. As you're here, take a moment to thank yourself for your practice today, for this time of self-love and self-care as you move your body. Thank you for practicing with me today.